All right. Thank you for listening to another episode of Remake Rewind. This is Mike, as always. I got my buddy Alex. What's up, man?
Hey, it's me.
I almost skipped the introductions and just went right into the topic because this is a big one. This is one we've been looking forward to pretty much the entire time you and I have been recording.
Hell yeah, it is.
This was supposed to come out last year, and then it got delayed. It got delayed to this year despite the pandemic, prior to all the pandemic pushbacks. So this one didn't get pushed back too bad with the pandemic, but yeah, we're gonna be talking about Godzilla versus King Kong. It just dropped today as of recording.
Yeah.
I'm about 30 to 45 minutes outside of watching it, and then we're also going to be talking about the original movie, which has the roles reversed. It's King Kong versus Godzilla from 1962 in Japan from Toho, or the 1963 American version is what we actually watched, the American cut of King Kong versus Godzilla. But yeah, I'm ready to get into it. Have you seen? Obviously, you just saw the new one. That one you couldn't have seen before. But have you seen the original one before?
No, I had not.
How are you with like the Toho kaiju movies? Like, is that in your wheelhouse at all?
I grew up watching Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So it feels very familiar. But I did not grow up watching the Toho movies. But I'm familiar with them. I knew what I was getting into.
I'm not super into them. Like anytime they were on TV, my dad would watch them. So I've seen a ton of Godzilla movies, but I couldn't really differentiate between one movie and another from like the Toho classics.
Mm-hmm.
I'm familiar with the big monsters, Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla, Godzilla, Mothra, and that's about it. But I'm a big fan of the King Kong movies. Like our first episode of Remake Rewind back in 2017. Almost exactly 4 years ago, our first episode was Godzilla, and we did 4 movies, and we still kept it under an hour, which was amazing. But we did the 2 American versions.
Clearly not with me on the podcast.
Yeah, and it was our first episode too. We had no idea what we were doing, but we did the 1998 Matthew Broderick Godzilla, and then we did the 2014, and then we also did the original 1954 Gojira and Shin Godzilla from 2016. So we covered 4 movies.
So what did you think of Shin Godzilla, first of all?
I fucking loved it.
Really? I watched the trailer for it. I've heard really good things about it, but I watched the trailer and I was just like, not.
It's fucking weird. It's bananas, but it is by far the best Godzilla movie. Like, wow. By far.
Okay, my follow-up question is, what did you think of the 2014 one?
Do not care for it. There's certain things that, and anybody can go back and listen to that episode, but there's certain things I like, and I think the thing that I like about the 2014 Godzilla has been something that's been missing in all subsequent Godzilla films, like King of Monsters and this one. What I think Gareth Edwards did really, really well in the 2014 one, and he did this in his movie Monsters, and he also did it in Rogue One, is he's very good at scale. And he made Godzilla look monstrously huge and made us look small, and just made Godzilla and all the other kaijus, and in these versions are called Titans, but they're kaijus. He made them look massive and really low camera angles to make them look even bigger, putting humans at us looking up at them, or us skydiving down over them, and just seeing how we're less than ants to these things. Where when you got into King of Monsters from 2019, everything was super wide shot, so you can get multiple monsters in, and I feel like it really lost the scale. And I think this movie is better at that than the 2019 version, but I still think the scale is inconsistent in this movie. Like, I don't think you get a consistent scale outside of the 2014 one. So that's the one thing I will say. But the big thing with Godzilla movies, going to the Toho ones, the Matthew Broderick one, Shin Godzilla, is the monsters aren't in it that much. Like an average Godzilla movie, it's like 8 minutes of Godzilla. So you have to have the people carry the story. And
which I think
that's what I hate about 2014.
Well, I think the 2014 one did that more than the subsequent MonsterVerse movies.
I agree, but I think they did a really shitty job with the characters. Like, none of them were especially likable. The only one who was likable was Bryan Cranston. He gets killed right away. And then Aaron Taylor Johnson's set up to be this, like, bomb guru who like specializes in like antique bombs, and then he
doesn't do the one thing
that he's a specialist at the end of the movie. And like I didn't care about him and Elizabeth Olsen. Like I just didn't care about any of the character dynamics in the 2014. So I haven't been a big fan of this series other than Kong Skull Island, which I fucking loved.
Yeah, I think Kong Skull Island is the best movie out of all of these
by a huge margin.
Yeah, I agree. I watched Kong Skull Island a month or so ago, and then I rewatched both the new Godzillas, the American ones, this week to get ready for this. And I have a better opinion about 2014 Godzilla than I did when I saw it in 2014. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit this week. And yeah, definitely. I mean, we're not reviewing that movie, so we don't talk about it too much. But I liked that they jawsed it and kind of kept Godzilla hidden for most of the movie. And then they had the big battle at the end. And I think that King of Monsters in this one don't do that. And they take a different direction, which I kind of also appreciate. I like that there's just big, like, balls out fights in both of those movies. So different, but I enjoyed both.
But generally,
it was fun to rewatch those. It was fun to rewatch those getting ready for this.
I wanted to. I just didn't have time. Now. I really wanted to at least watch Kong Skull Island because I've actually only seen it once. And that was one that, like, I didn't think it looked good until, like, 3 days before the movie came out. They dropped a final trailer, and then I was like, oh, shit, that looks great. And then I ended up really, really enjoying it. But I'm a big fan of the Kong series. Like, I fucking love the original TKO 30s version. I think it's a wonderful movie with the rear projection stuff. I think it holds up very well. I actually even like the 70s version with, like, Jeff Bridges. I used to really like the 2005 Peter Jackson one when we revisited it for the podcast. Didn't like it as much, but I like King Kong more than I like Godzilla, but I do appreciate the Godzilla film. So I was really looking forward to this episode, and I'm looking forward to discussing these movies with you because I definitely have opinions on these. So I'm ready to talk about the American one when you're ready.
King Kong is RKO, by the way.
Oh, RKO. I said TKO, didn't I? Total knockout. RKO, yeah.
Speaking of people being TKO'd, let's talk about the main bout here. King Kong versus Godzilla, 1963.
This movie's fucking weird, man.
Oh, boy. It was, it's not a good movie, and it was just barely weird enough, like a weird enough time capsule to hold my interest, but it's not a great film, is it?
No, and the story of how it got made is bananas as well. Have you looked into that at all?
Lay it on me.
Okay, so basically, RKO at this point had already stopped making movies, but they still owned the rights to a lot of things. So there was one of the stop motion animators at RKO who worked on the original King Kong movie, had an idea of having King Kong fight a giant, like Frankenstein, literally fighting Frankenstein that got like blown up to being giant. And so like a writer at RKO heard about the idea and stole it and went and shopped it around. And then eventually someone's like, well, you can't do Frankenstein because Universal owns the rights to the look, but not the actual character. And there was all this weird licensing stuff. So then they changed it. While they were pitching it, they were calling it King Kong versus Prometheus, but they just wanted some other giant monster. So eventually Toho found out about it, and it'd been like 7 years since they'd done a Godzilla movie. So they're like, well, why don't we just make it Godzilla? So he sold this.
This is Godzilla's third appearance.
Third
right?
appearance. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Toho decides to make the movie, and they got to make an American cut. So they made the Japanese cut, which came out in 1962. The guy who sold it to them decides to make a cut. He gets $15,000 to make some edits and cuts. And then he goes to RKO, who at that point weren't making movies anymore. And they had a bunch of movies that were in the can that weren't going to get released and all this stuff. So they ended up like cutting footage from like other movies, like earthquake scenes and stuff like that, to cut into here to make it a little bit more dynamic. And then for whatever reason, they didn't think American audiences would really get the Godzilla versus King Kong versus Godzilla in Japan, the Toho version. So he thought that American audiences would need a little bit more explanation. So they set up this like like the shtick where they have like a news broadcast. Like the whole movie is essentially a news broadcast, but it's really just a movie intercut with a guy who's a news anchor. And it's the worst fucking production value. Like literally it's just like an office in a building, and they have like giant maps like taped or pinned to the wall.
Yeah,
And there's like wrinkles and folds and tears in it. And like you just see that, and then he's just like talking, and he brings in witnesses and like scientists to discuss it. And it's literally just like a chair that you see in an elementary school with like the metal legs.
Yeah.
And like there's like transition effects where they're supposed to be reviewing like a monitor, and it's literally just like a still image printed on paper, all wrinkly and crinkly, in like a wooden frame painted to look like a television. And then it would just like zoom in on on this fake TV and hold for like 3 seconds, and then it would transition to video. It was just fucking bananas, man.
Yeah, and the anchors, they had like a UN anchor, which is just like a United States guy, an American guy, and his correspondent in Tokyo, and they would just sort of deliver exposition about what's happening, you know, where Godzilla has been and how they're bringing King Kong in to fight him or whatever.
Right, but then it's also just like we're seeing.
Oh no, not
like,
even to fight him, right? Because they have to find the berries, because the guy who makes it happen is the owner of the main television company in Japan.
No, it's a pharmaceutical company.
It's both. You didn't let me finish my sentence.
Sorry.
He owns the television company in Japan, like the BBC, but it's the Japanese one. But he also owns a pharmaceutical company, and he wants to get these berries that they're using to keep Godzilla or King Kong like sedated on the island, or happy, not sedated, but comfortable on his island. And he wants to sell those berries, but he also wants to televise a fight between these two guys because his television ratings are dipping.
Yeah. And like
it's
this
ridiculous.
whole movie, like all the Godzilla movies are supposed to be satire and have a message about what's going on in the world. So of course, you know, the original ones were, you know, about nuclear, the after effects of dropping the nuclear bomb. This one was supposed to be about, at the time, Japan was, you know, rapidly advancing in technology. They were exactly what that pharma conglomerate broadcaster guy was doing. Is they started doing these over the top promotions and stuff like that, and the filmmakers just wanted to point out like how stupid like conglomerates were at the time. So they made this movie, and it's
that's actually kind of cool though. I like that. I don't know if the execution, or maybe it's just how long it's been. But theoretically, I like that idea, and I definitely got the sense watching this movie, like particularly with the there's like an American scientist that they have on the United Nations talk show, radio show, and he's just like wrong about everything, and he's an idiot,
talking out his ass.
Yeah, and to me, it was like clear that was a deliberate decision by the filmmakers to make this like authority figure seem like an asshole, and I thought that was pretty funny and satirical.
I don't want to give that guy that much credit, the American guy, because that was strictly the American part that they just chopped in.
I'm saying I think it was deliberate, but I think it was not. I think it was like too dry. I don't think it was delivered as well.
Maybe because I think the biggest thing was like them explaining using him to explain things that didn't really make sense. So one of the big things in this movie, and this happens in previous Godzilla movies, like every time Godzilla comes, they're like, well, fuck, what are we going to do? This thing's like an unstoppable monster. What are we going to do? So in the first movie, they ended up creating like a bomb that like destroys oxygen and like suffocated Godzilla and then pulled all the oxygen out of his molecules.
Which is also in King of Monsters, the 2019 one.
Yep. And so then the second movie, it's actually a different Godzilla. And they couldn't do the same attempt because the scientist who created the oxygen bomb killed himself, and he took the secret with him because he didn't want anybody else to use it. So they tried to kill Godzilla with electricity. So in that movie, they used 500,000 volts to try to kill Godzilla. It didn't work. So in this movie, there's a through line with electricity. So they try like 1,000,000 volts at a certain point to kill Godzilla. And inexplicably, King Kong is like super powered by electricity and lightning bolts and whatnot. At one point, they explain that like they tried to kill Godzilla with it, but it's not going to work. But luckily, it helps King Kong. But it's
pretty lucky.
Yeah, it's a bananas movie.
Get it? Cause monkey. Bananas cause monkey. I think it's an interesting note that like the idea of using the UN broadcast to reformat the Japanese version of this movie for American audiences or just for different audiences is something that they did with that movie Merlin's Shop of Mystical Wonders. Do you know that?
Never even heard of that movie.
You know, makes sense that you haven't. It's an American movie from 1996. Do you know the little doll, the little monkey? That's funny that we're talking about monkeys. It's a little monkey doll toy with the symbols.
Yeah.
That, like, claps and the eyes light up red. So that's from a movie from 1984 called The Devil's Gift. The guy can't get rid of the monkey and it keeps on like killing people.
Isn't that a George Romero film? I thought it was called something. I thought it was called Monkey Shine.
It's based on a Stephen King short story, and I think it's been made two different ways. So there's a movie called The Devil's Gift that's about a toy monkey that kills people, and it was recut to be in this movie Merlin's Shop of Mystical Wonders, which Mystery Science Theater 3000 does like a really good send up of. Nice. And the Merlin movie is this weird like it's kind of like an anthology. It's about this guy, it's about Merlin, not this guy, like the actual Merlin who runs a crazy shop. It's like the Rick and Morty, the Devil's shop. Yeah, it's like a monkey paw thing. But it's like an anthology, but it's also not, because it's only two stories. Like Merlin tells these two stories.
But this is set up like a movie? About. Is it a TV movie or was this like a theatrical movie?
I think it was in theaters. Ernest Borgnine is in it.
Oh, okay. I love that guy.
Yeah. So like the first story is about a married couple that can't have kids, and the husband like gaslights his wife and gets a book from the Merlin shop and ends up being able to like breathe fire, and I think he kills her or something. And then the second story is The Devil's Gift, but it's recut and they got rid of all the gore so it could be like PG-13 instead of R. And yeah, they just, re-released a 12-year-old movie inside of another movie.
I've never even heard of it. I might have to try to find that somewhere.
Yeah, watch the Mystery Science Theater 3000 version. It's really fun. The real version is not worth watching. But anyway, it's interesting to see another movie that has a wraparound narrative to repackage an older movie.
That's funny. Yeah. So to get back into this one, and I feel bad, both movies that we're going to be talking about today, I couldn't tell you a single character's name. But
yeah. And, at least in the new one, I don't feel like I need to know any names besides Godzilla and King Kong. That's all I'm worried about.
This one, I just called the two, I guess you can call them leads. So, like, the movie at the beginning basically sets up, like, the head of the pharmaceutical company / broadcast company, like, mentions that he found this island where they got these berries that have all these amazing medicinal properties, but the natives there would only give him a handful. And he's gone back a few times, and each time he's only been able to get a handful. So he wants to send these two guys over there to try to convince them to get more / find the god of the island. So they keep referring to this god of the island that they use the berries to appease. I don't know any of these characters' names, so I just called him Farmer Bro. Like, my notes the entire movie are Farmer Bros and Cowardly Farmer Bro. So yeah, they show up on the island, and immediately we're just like a prolonged blackface scene.
Yeah, that wasn't great.
It's bad, and it's like they didn't even, I mean, you should never do blackface, but they didn't even do a good job. Like, there's so many characters that were like in blackface where like their arms weren't completely done, like they'd be doing their little dances and like shaking around, and like their forearms would be like white still. Like,
if I were working on a movie and they asked me or they just started slathering my body in paint to represent a different race, I would simply not do it. Yeah,
that's fair. That's totally fair.
I know it's a different time, and you can't judge people the same way that you can in 2021. But goddamn, dude, there's maybe 50 extras that are painted a different color.
And to be fair, that like we have our issues with race in America, clearly. But in America, we do have a lot more diversity. So if we need to cast natives, whether you're going with South American natives or African natives or, Eastern Asian natives, we have a lot of actors you can find for that. In Japan, they really only have Japanese actors. Like, they're not super diverse there. So like, I almost want to give them a pass. And it's, it's 2021. So it's really easy to look back on it. But it is like it's bad. Like, they didn't even try to do it well. So that was a little weird. Definitely took me out of the movie. They're also giving kids cigarettes for fun.
I flagged that one too. And then the mom takes it away and starts smoking it.
And then he's like instantly just shitting on their culture. Like, lightning's going. Like, you hear lightning and then you hear roars. And the guy's like, it's just lightning. These fucking ignorant people.
You know what? I pinged on that too. But then like in the next breath, there's an actual roar, and then that guy looks like an asshole. So I think that was another thing where it's meant to be sort of a joke or sort of satirical, and maybe just didn't land perfectly.
Yeah, and like, he did
give
get
him
his
credit for that
comeuppance
one.
on that, but it was still like, he's still a dickhead, and he's like, the whole movie he's like making fun of people, and like they're going on their little like expedition to find the god, which of course is King Kong, and then like the cowardly pharma bro, who's like the slightly chubbier one, is like talking about how his corns hurt and his feet hurt, and he wants to go back, and then like inexplicably there's like an earthquake, and like half the mountain falls down, so they just turn around and go home. Or not home, but they go back to like the little village. And then you get this like scene where like they actually used real octopi and had octopi attacking like these little miniature villages, and then they composited like the villagers like running and screaming in front of it.
So it's meant to be like a huge octopus.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a giant octopus, and King Kong goes to fight the octopus, but initially like the octopus just wraps itself around his face, and then like he doesn't really do much, but then the octopus just decides to like leave.
The effects in this movie are really interesting. I don't know that they're well done, but clearly so much work was put into the miniatures.
I love the miniatures.
It was like impressive and fun to watch for sure.
I really like miniature and stop motion. Like it just feels more real, even though it's like corny, and it's not like, something about it works. Like, that's why I really like the 30s RKO King Kong, and also like one of the best examples I think of miniature and stop motion is the original Time Machine movie from like the 60s, the H.G. Wells movie. Mm-hmm. There's some amazing miniature work, and I really appreciate good miniature work. And like obviously the Lord of the Rings still did miniature work, and then you had like Dante's Peak did miniature work, Independence Day. Like, it looks real. Like, I would much rather we still did miniature work, but we don't really do that very much.
Yeah, and I think this is like not a great example of miniature work, but there's definitely some magic to it still.
There's a charm to it.
Yeah, there's a charm, exactly.
So this King Kong, like, his only move is throwing rocks. Like, he throws rocks at the octopus, and then they kind of run, like, they just kind of like and run away back into the ocean.
How did you feel about the octopus ASMR? It made me very uncomfortable.
It was super weird. Well, if it makes you feel better, I mean, I don't think this will make most people feel better, but they use something like, I want to say they use like 5 or 6 octopi to film this scene, and all of them were released back into the wild except for one, which the director ate.
I mean, I wasn't too worried about that. I figured they probably took decent care of them.
Yeah. Well, they killed and ate one. So
yeah. Well, that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But no, just like the way they recorded the sounds and like mixed them made me very uncomfortable. Lots of sloshing and slurping.
Yeah, it was pretty gross. It really was pretty gross. I definitely fell asleep like 5 times watching this movie. I haven't slept very well this week. Like, I don't think I've had a night with more than 3 hours of sleep in like a week. What was that?
Oh, buddy.
Yeah, dude, I don't know why. Like, but yeah, I ended up having to rewind and watch a bunch of shit on this. And this was only available on YouTube. So, rewinding and scrubbing on YouTube is not easy. But
hey, YouTube, fix your UI.
Yeah, you dicks.
One of my notes is that the reveal of Godzilla was pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, it was. So like the rest of the movie we can almost just like really skim, because it really just kind of, like, this movie's short. It's only like an hour and 31 minutes, including credits.
Yeah.
On both ends. So it's not a super long movie, but they eventually after fighting the octopus, King Kong just goes and sits, and there's like these giant jars of the berry juice, and he just like drinks it, grabs another barrel, drinks another one, and it's like NyQuil, and he just immediately falls asleep.
Yeah, he gets tanked and just passes out.
Yeah, he just conks out, and then they put him on like a raft. And
somehow.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about this, and I actually really appreciated this, is that they realize like this is a giant monster that we can't really control, so we need to have a safeguard. So they like rigged their raft with dynamite, so that way if like King Kong got unruly, they could just like blow him up, or at least blow up the raft, and he would sink into the ocean, and then they can get away. Which is pretty fucked up. But there's a point where like the military guys are like are talking to the farmer bros and the pharma CEO / broadcast guy, and the military is like, dude, we've dealt with Godzillas in the past and Mothras and Ghidorahs in the past. We don't want these fucking giant monsters in Tokyo. So no, you can't bring him here. And the guy's like, his name is Takeo, the CEO guy, and he's like, but he's mine. And the military's like, the fuck he is. Like, if you keep him, we're gonna arrest you. And then he faints, like a really over the top, like, oh. Like,
that dude. The Japanese characters are acting pretty goofy, but that dude is in a whole other movie. Yeah. He's like Kung Fu Hustle level ridiculous.
Yeah, it doesn't match.
And that's not totally a knock. That's not a knock. It's kind of fun, but it's very totally different than the other characters.
So at one point, the other kind of subplot that's going on with all this going on is there's a submarine that's like lost in I don't know where exactly, but it's somewhere where there's icebergs, and in the
an American submarine.
Yeah, it's an American submarine, but there was in the previous Godzilla movie, they could not kill Godzilla, but they trapped it in like an iceberg. And the submarine crashes into it just happens to crash into the iceberg that Godzilla is trapped in. And it just kind of crumbles, and it's just like a hollow iceberg, and Godzilla's just like hanging out at a hollow iceberg. It's pretty stupid. And But
to their credit, that's like canon. That's where he was hanging out since 1955. He was trapped within it. So
I don't remember exactly how they do that. So they tried to kill, like, there's a point where Godzilla or King Kong starts to wake up, and they're like, oh, we're gonna kill it. And like the main farmer bro goes to like shoot it with his little rifle. He also shot the octopus with like very little effect. Like it did nothing, but he's like trying to shoot King Kong, and like the CEO guy's like, no, he's mine, don't kill him. And then like the guy, same thing, he's just like, no, and he like is waving his arms around and accidentally hits the plunger on the dynamite to set it off, which doesn't go off. So then they're like, well, shoot the dynamite. So like the main, I guess the lead, like I guess you can call him the lead, keeps just like shooting. Like he shoots like 20 rounds before he hits the dynamite, and it just like blows up, and King Kong ends up in the water. And then it cuts to like, oh, he made it to land. Oh, there's Godzilla. Like Godzilla got to land at the same time. Well, and it's like lucky. This, which is like this, there was like this weird plateau, and it's like Godzilla's chest came up to the top of the plateau, but Godzilla was on top of it. And King Kong's just throwing rocks, and it's not effective at all. And then Godzilla just like lights a fire, and King Kong's like, oh, I'm out, and like runs away.
Yeah, he just sort of scratches his head, and he's like, well, I guess I'll just go home.
Yeah, he's like, I can't deal with that.
I'm going to check out a different part of this island.
So the rest of the movie is them trying to figure out how to kill Godzilla. So like they build a giant pit. Like they dig a giant pit, fill it with like poison gas, and then they like pour gasoline for miles because Godzilla's attracted to lights in this version. So they use like a fire trail to attract Godzilla to this pit, and then they try to blow up the pit, and it doesn't do anything. So then they set up like an electric fence with 1,000,000 volts. It also doesn't do anything. And then we finally basically get to the end of the movie. Like King Kong and Godzilla are fighting, and Godzilla just keeps whooping on Kong until he hits the electric fence, and then he comes back and fights a little bit, gets killed. He ultimately gets killed, and then luckily a lightning strike happens and reinvigorates King Kong, and then they kind of just tussle, and they fall into like the water, and then like King Kong comes out, and they're like, yeah, King Kong won, but Godzilla could totally come back. Like that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's it. Like, and the final battle is also on top of Mount Fuji.
Oh, the other thing, which was weird, and another really weird subplot, was that they, at the beginning of the movie, when they're first being told about the berries, the farmer bro pulls out like a wire, and he's like, "This wire is like thinner than a piece of hair,
wire, dude.
And it's so strong, like it's stronger than steel. Look!" And he like does a weird thing, and then they realize they need to get King Kong over to where Godzilla is, and so somehow they get these giant balloons. And they use the same wire, and they wire.
it's like he invented the wire. Like he keeps on saying your wire.
Yeah.
The implication is that he invented it, but then they have like reams of it, enough to wrap up King Kong.
With balloons. They used balloons to bring Kong over, and then they like shoot the balloons out so he drops so he can fight Godzilla. So yeah, there's a whole subplot about a guy who has like amazing wires.
Yeah, it's
a bad movie.
There's also a subplot about him like coming home to his wife who thinks that he's been dead.
Yeah, where did that come from? Like they mentioned a plane crash. She's like, I thought you died because of the plane crash.
I think we probably lost a lot of that in the American version.
Yeah, because that didn't make sense. And that scene immediately came from like after a news cut, like the anchor going like, and we're going back to Japan because Godzilla is going to make it to Tokyo. And then like it's these two women like, oh, our farmer bros are dead. What happened to our farmer bros? This is so sad. It's like, this doesn't make any sense to try to frame this as a news broadcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super weird. And it's very apparent that the American side really cut corners. Like we mentioned already, every time you cut to an American office, there was literally just like paper maps that were super generic. And they would just wave to it like, oh, and he's going to Tokyo over there. And they would just kind of like vaguely wave to an area on the map.
They said he's in this area, and they just pointed to a map of all of Japan. Yeah. It's like, yo, you just pointed at 3 cities. What are we...
Yeah, but then when you would go to the Japanese part and when they would be coordinating and stuff, you would see like 3D maps with actual terrain lifted off the wall and everything. It's just like, this is so stupid. Like how drastically different the quality of the different parts of the movie are.
Yeah, this is maybe not a recommend movie, I think.
Well, you want to hear something bananas? So,
yeah,
at the time, King Kong was a huge movie. You know, obviously one of the biggest movies of all time in America. King Kong was seen as the bigger draw, so that's why he got first billing and why he was ultimately deemed to be the winner of the fight. Mm-hmm. But the Japanese version of this movie is the 13th highest grossing film in all of Japan cinema, and it's also the highest grossing Godzilla movie in Japan. This is also the first time either character, King Kong or Godzilla, were in color, and also this is the first time either of them were in widescreen. So
yep, that's true.
Yep.
It's worth noting the original King Kong is from 1933, so it took him 30 years to battle Godzilla.
Yep. God, I really want to go back and watch the original 30s one. That one's on HBO Max. It's really good.
Yeah, I think I'd like to watch that too, actually.
Yeah, it's really good. It's a fantastic movie. I was blown away by how much I liked it when we covered it, 4 years ago. So, but yeah,
it might be worth watching that and the original Godzilla for a mini episode.
Yeah, we should do that. We need to do another Patreon exclusive, so we should probably that's a good option. I was thinking of doing Kong Skull Island, but I'd be totally down to go back to the beginning of these great characters.
Yeah.
All right, bud. What have you been up to?
Well, sir, I watched Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension, to sort of wrap up my Paranormal Activity rewatch.
Nice.
Yeah, not great, but fun to sort of the gimmick of like seeing the demons and what's going on with the special camera. You've seen it, right?
I haven't seen any Paranormal Activity movies. Not a single fucking one. I
think we talked about this. The first one is absolutely worth watching. And if you like that, the second and I think the third one are pretty decent. Actually, the first and the third one are the best. The second is not as good. The fourth one,
that's what I've heard.
Not as great. And then there's the one that they did that was like aimed directly at the Latino market, which is, is what it is. It feels like sort of a cash grab. But also cool that they, include different type of story. But ultimately not a great movie. And then this one, and this was sort of the final gasp, and they try to reinvigorate or get more interest in the franchise by promising that you could see the demons and see the activity that was so paranormal. And the way they do it is they have like a specially modified VHS camera that sees the ghost dimension. So they tell another story about a family getting attacked by a demon, and this one you get to see the activity.
Sounds kind of dumb.
Yeah, not a ton of fun, but interesting visuals. And if you've watched all the movies in the series, then it's like, well, I kind of have to watch this. It's like the last Saw movie.
Got it. Did you see the trailer for the new Saw movie?
I haven't watched it yet. I think I saw like a teaser before pandemic.
It looks, well, I mean, they just dropped the trailer yesterday. A new one that starts Chris Rock. It's called Spiral, and it looks terrible.
Yeah. No, I like I said, I think I saw a teaser for it. I knew Chris Rock was in it. I've seen some visuals.
I thought you said prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, they dropped a trailer before the pandemic.
Oh, did they?
Like, mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought the new one
was supposed to be out last year.
Oh, damn! It looks bad. It looks really bad.
That doesn't surprise me. I'll still watch it. Speaking of bad, I also watched Bad Trip, the new Eric Andre movie.
Oh, I don't like Eric Andre.
I love Eric Andre, and I love this movie. It was so good. So much fun. It's basically like if you've seen Bad Grandpa, they do like a narrative told through pranks.
Okay.
With real people.
Got it.
And it was a lot of fun, man. What else? I revisited Clerks 2 and Private Parts. Yeah, I love both of those movies. And then the Godzilla movies to get ready for this.
Nice.
Yeah, and I thoroughly enjoyed both of those movies, Godzilla 2014 and King of Monsters.
So I'm just gonna shotgun what I went through.
Yeah.
So we watched. Katrina is obviously an actor, and she's the SAG Awards are coming up, so we tried to watch a bunch of SAG stuff that are nominated. So we watched The Great. We watched the entire series so far. Well, it's only one season so far. It's fucking fantastic. It is hilarious. It's dark, but it's also like optimistic at the same time. It's on Hulu, and it's Nicholas Hoult and not Dakota Fanning, her sister Elle Fanning, are just fantastic, and it is such a great show. I highly recommend it. The first 3 episodes of Invincible dropped on Amazon, and I fucking love it. Like, I had a blast. I shotgunned all of those this weekend.
Yeah, we watched all those too.
Oh, it was so good. It was so. I'm so excited for the subsequent episodes. I really like, and I'm not going to spoil it, but every episode has about 35 minutes following Invincible, and then there's the credits, and then there's about 5 to 10 minutes of post-credit stuff every episode, and it's almost like it's 2 different stories going at the same time. Obviously, they're interconnected, but the Invincible character, so as of right now, is like removed from what's going on the the other side, and it's just like, oh, it's so good. I'm so excited, and the cast is incredible. Like, I'm very happy with this so far. So that's something I'm gonna be watching every week.
Yeah, maybe we should revisit that in a mini episode.
Yeah,
because I'd like to talk to you more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Superstore, it was something that I binged, a couple months ago, and then I caught up. And this season 6 is its last season. It's unfortunate that it's its last season because it was the COVID season, and they heavily lean into it being COVID and that them being essential workers. So it was a really depressing last season, and it ends with the store getting shut down and turned into like a warehouse, and like the company they work for turning into like an Amazon type company. So it's a really kind of sad ending, and it just kind of like a show that I thought was fantastic. The last season just really was depressing and sucked. So that was a bummer. We watched The Trial of the Chicago 7, which was fantastic.
Oh yeah, I've been meaning to watch that.
It's really good. We tried to watch Da 5 Bloods, and we got less than halfway through. Like, I know a lot of people really like that movie, but I just thought the acting was terrible. Like, Katrina checked out. She was like on her phone. I tried to watch it, and then we like paused it to, get snacks or something. And then we're just like, we don't really want to watch this anymore. Like, it's like they take like, it's like he tried to take like 3 different like Vietnam movies and mash it into one. So there's little bits of like, I'm blanking on the movies, but it essentially has like 3 different movies that it mashes into one. And I don't think any of the actors had any chemistry. And it was also weird because you had these like 60-year-old men who are playing 60-year-old men, and it's like 2 timelines. Like it flashes back to it's the present day, and then it also flashes back to like the early 70s, and they have the same actors playing themselves, but they don't do any kind of makeup or anything to age them down. And it didn't work for me. So it kind of bummed me out because I really wanted to see that. And it was like one of Chadwick Boseman's last movies. And it just wasn't for me. And then I restarted watching Malcolm in the Middle, and it's good.
Getting your Cranston fix.
Yeah. I love Bryan Cranston. But yeah, that's what I watched.
All right, well, let's get into the new Godzilla versus Kong.
Let's do it. Spoilers, obviously. This just came out today.
Yeah, we're gonna spoil this.
By the time this episode drops, it'll have only been out for 2 days. But yeah, if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it and then come back and listen to this, and you'll be good.
Well, listen, from the top, I had so much fun with this movie.
I found it to be meh. I liked it more than King of Monsters. I would put it. I probably say this is my second favorite of the four, but I don't put it anywhere. Like, I give Kong Skull Island an A. I give this one a C minus. I give Godzilla 2014 no. I'm gonna give this one like a C plus. I don't think it's a C minus. I'll give it a C plus, and then I'll give 2014.
I think this one
a lower grade, and then I give King of Monsters an F. I hated King of Monsters.
I think this one, like, tone wise, is building off of King of Monsters and
Absolutely.
adding in some of the charm from Kong Skull Island. And the original Godzilla feels sort of like, the Man of Steel or Batman v Superman that they're course correcting from. They, each one of these MonsterVerse movies, the two Godzillas, Kong Skull Island, Cole Skong Island, and this one, all have pretty different visual aesthetics, but I think they all are invested in having a visual aesthetic.
Yeah, that's
maybe
true.
You'll disagree with that, but I think all of them go to great lengths to have like comic book panel keyframes. Like,
I agree with you on that. Absolutely.
I think there are fucking gorgeous shots in every single one of these movies. So I think like the original Godzilla is the most like bleak and
for sure,
and gritty out of all these, and then after that I think they course corrected a little bit and tried to make them like fun kaiju movies, and that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning. Like, I feel like it's got a different vibe to it, but I still kind of appreciate it.
Yeah,
I think if you're going to do giant monsters fighting each other, these are kind of doing the best version of it. And also, since we were talking about Justice League recently, I think this is more of a comic book movie than Justice League is.
I agree. I think that's a very accurate assessment of this franchise.
And that's, we already talked about Godzilla 2014. Like, I enjoy it. I wouldn't change anything about that movie. Well, that's not true, but I enjoy it for what it is. And that's not to say that it's anything like Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which is,
if I had to watch one movie over and over and over again, and it had to be the 2014 Godzilla or Justice League, either version, I'm going to pick the Godzilla movie.
Yeah, man. I think this, just to paraphrase that one more time, I think that this is most similar to Godzilla King of Monsters. I think it's a big, fast-paced action, kaiju roller coaster, which is not what the original Godzilla is, the 2014 Godzilla. And it's also not really what Kong Skull Island is. But I think that this one works in some of the character work that they did on Kong that gave it that charm.
I agree. I think the pacing on this was really good. Like, this movie ripped.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's any wasted. I don't think there's any scenes in here you really could get rid of or would have to get rid of. I think it flowed well. There's just weird things like off the top. I'm just going to say this. What kind of threw me, and I think it goes perfectly in line with your assessment of what you said, like how they essentially course corrected to make it more fun, and they realized, you know what, we're going to mix this with Kong, and it's going to culminate in King Kong and Godzilla fighting. We're going to make it fun. So where I found it a little weird was, you mentioned the first Godzilla movie was very bleak and grim, and it was just like, here are these forces of nature, and we're humans, and we can't do a goddamn thing about it. Oh, good thing Godzilla actually likes us and is a protector. Thank God.
He doesn't even like us. He's just a force of nature that wants to balance things, and that happens to mostly work in our favor.
Right. And then you go into the second movie, and it gets a little out there. So King of Monsters, and you just watched this, so you can correct me if my very, very succinct summary is off. They lean into the hard sci-fi. They really lean into it on that one, where they're like, okay, we've got Ghidorah, who's another alpha who directly challenges Godzilla, but Ghidorah can also kind of control some of the other titans or kaijus, but we generated this tone that can kind of point them where we wanted to go. And there's like this shadow organization that was like, it's like the anti-monarch that was trying to manipulate Ghidorah to like destroying something. I don't remember what the ultimate angle was, but that's essentially it. Like it leans into that sci-fi element a lot more. I mean, like these are forces of nature and there's a hierarchy, and we're going to try to manipulate the hierarchy with a tone, like a sound. And this one just goes completely balls to the wall, where there's like, we're just going to spoil it at the top. Like they spoiled it in the last trailer last week, but there's Mecha Godzilla, and they have these like spaceships that can go, you know, these like hovercraft with, like,
and we go into
fields.
fucking Hollow Earth.
Yeah, we go into the Hollow Earth, and there's like these energy sources, and King Kong, like the Hollow Earth had like giant like architecture and giant thrones and like underground buildings and giant statues, and there was a culture, and it just completely goes like, you almost can't, other than the Godzilla design, it's almost impossible to link the 2014 Godzilla to this movie other than the design. Like, if you took out that middle one, you'd be like, what? How the fuck did we get here? And even leaning off of the King of Monsters, it's still like, how the fuck did we get here? And like, why would you make these choices? Like, I understand wanting to make like a robot to fight, you know, the Titans, and you don't want to rely on Godzilla just in case he ever goes evil. I could get behind that plot. I understand. It
feels, by the way, that feels so Batman v Superman.
Yeah, it feels like that, and also Pacific Rim. And they've talked about like Pacific Rim. They wanted to do a crossover with Pacific Rim and this series, which I think would be cool. Awesome. And that makes sense. So it's like, I kind of like, they modeled the mecha, you know, robot off of Godzilla. Why would you not just like make, and it's human controlled. It's supposed to be, at least. Why would you not just make like a giant robot? Man.
Similarly to Pacific Rim, it's got a little guy that's piloting it, but he's not inside.
Yeah.
But he's using his mind to control it.
Exactly. So it's like, why would you not just make it a human? Like, it's a little weird for, you know, a human. Like, we don't have a tail. We don't have all these things. Like, why would you not make it like something that is an analog?
You're coming at it
logically.
Yeah, well, you're coming at it like from the Godzilla 2014 point of view, which is fine, but also like you've got to accept that that's just not what this series is anymore. I just think it wasn't in Godzilla King of Monsters, and this sort of goes a little bit further.
Yeah. But at least like there was a logical, like I understood the logic going from the 2014 to 2019. But this one just goes like, no, we're full on have future tech, like hovercrafts and force fields and nuclear lasers and shit. Like, and this movie,
you know, I think if you have Godzilla and all these other Titans fucking around for 5-7 years or whatever it's been at this point, you're going to put more research into those areas, and you know, it might progress faster than you can imagine. Like, look at the coronavirus vaccine. Like, usually vaccines take at least 18 months, and this one was almost was under a year.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with, you know, World War I and World War II. Like when humanity is put in a corner, it develops technology very quickly. So that doesn't bother me too much. That's fair. I think the idea that they modeled it after Godzilla is definitely funny, and it didn't bother me at all. But you're right. Like, that's silly. How does this guy control a tail with his mind? He's a human. It should just look like a human.
Yeah. Well, and then also like the biggest thing that was the Hollow Earth theory and the essentially little spaceships that they were flying around piloting.
The inverse gravity spaceships.
And that was the thing. So the Hollow Earth thing, and like we haven't even talked the plot. We're just talking like these weird things that are in the middle of the plot. The Hollow Earth thing didn't really make sense to me. Not that it needs to make sense, but essentially the base level summary of this movie is it starts with Godzilla attacking this corporation called Apex, and they're like cybernetics and robots and AI, and you know, they're just a conglomerate that does technology. And Godzilla is attacking this facility. There's also a podcaster who works for this company, but also is trying to like reveal the secrets. Mm-hmm. And he gets with 11 from Stranger Things, and also the kid from Hunt for the Wilder People, and
Deadpool 2.
And Deadpool 2. So that's like one plot where they're trying to reveal the secret. You have Kyle Chandler, who was in King of Monsters, who hated Godzilla, but by the end of that movie he liked Godzilla, but this movie he's back to hating Godzilla because Godzilla's attacking people again.
He has a conversation with 11 where they're arguing with each other, but I swear that they're saying the same thing.
They really are.
He says like, monsters are like humans. They can change. And it sounds like he's saying that they can go from being good to bad because now he's cleaning up after Godzilla attacking. But then she's saying, well, it's not his fault. He was being provoked by something. And he's like, yeah, I know. So, go back to school and blah, blah, blah. And I almost rewound it a couple times to parse out what they were saying. Because it sounded like they were just arguing the same point.
Yeah, they were like splitting hairs. Like they were almost on the same page, but not quite.
Yeah.
So like that's
it was a strangely written scene.
Yeah, that's like one plot. And like Kyle Chandler pops up a couple different places because he's now like the head of Monarch, but like doesn't really do anything for the plot. Like he's just kind of there periodically to go like, oh, somebody should care about 11.
So this movie, I have opinions about 11 too, by the way. This movie is the least interested in its human characters out of all four of these.
That's correct. I agree with you 100%.
And I didn't read the whole interview, but I just saw something with Adam Wingard where, by the way, this movie is directed by Adam Wingard, who is a fantastic indie horror film director who has sort of made it to the big leagues now. Like this movie is being very well received. It's already made back its budget in the first day. Like it's a hit.
And he just got Thundercats this week.
Exactly. He got Thundercats, I think, because it was a hit. They probably waited to release the news today, but I think they also wanted to make sure that it did well. But Adam Wingard did You're Next, wonderful indie horror film, very similar to...
I've heard that one.
Yeah. Similar to Cabin in the Woods, if you like that. And he did the Death Note movie for Netflix, which, not great, but I think he was sort of brought on to fix that. I think it's watchable because of him. The Blair Witch reboot.
Yeah.
And which I'm naming like the movies that did not do fantastic, but he also did The Fucking Guest with Dan Stevens from 2014.
That movie, I met Dan Stevens
so much fun
when that movie came out. He came to Best Buy to buy a bunch of copies of it fuck it. I just said it. I used to work at Best Buy and he came over to buy a bunch of copies of that movie. He was super nice and super cool. Yeah.
I'm glad that Adam Wingard got like a studio movie that is finally doing well. He's also doing the sequel to Face Off, by the way.
Yeah, he is, which I think is fantastic. What I think is really interesting is you look at these four movies. I could not tell you who directed the King of Monsters, and I'm not going to look it up. And I can't I can't remember his name either for Kong Skull Island, but the two guys who directed movies with Kong.
Jordan Voight Roberts.
Yes, him. Thank you. He's great. He's doing the Metal Gear Solid movie. So like the two people who worked with Kong are like blowing up, and like the people who did the Godzilla movies aren't doing as well. So that's
I think Gareth Edwards.
He did Rogue One, but essentially got ripped off of that movie and replaced by Tony Gilroy unofficially.
I think that he will do all right going forward.
I think he'll do fine.
He'll have a good track record.
He'll pull through, but I think it's just interesting that the two people who did the Kong movies are the ones that like are immediately seeing success.
So anyway, Adam Wingard said something recently that he thinks that eventually they should just take the human characters out of these monsterverse movies. And I'm paraphrasing, so if I got that out of context, Adam, I'm sorry. Please come on our podcast. But you can feel that in this movie. And I think that's like something that I wouldn't agree with in theory, but having watched his movie, if it's executed well, I don't really have a problem with it. Like, I just want to see Turbo Lizard and Monkey fight.
Yeah, I guess.
And if it's fucking cool, then it's fucking cool, man.
Yeah. I mean, you know what? The 2012 or 2015 Mad Max Fury Road, when they announced that movie and they were saying that it's essentially a 2-hour car chase, I was like, that's going to be terrible. There's no way that's going to work. And it is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, I watch that movie at least twice a year.
It's all about execution.
Yeah. So you know what? I've been proven wrong before. I did not think that Fury Road would be even filmable, let alone good. And it is by far one of my favorite movies ever made. So, you know, I'm never going to say never anymore.
You talk about taking the human characters out of the MonsterVerse and how that sounds like a bad idea, but all of my emotional connections to this movie were to Kong.
And the little girl. I would say the little girl was very effective.
But she's like a satellite of him. She's connected to him.
Yeah, that's fair.
The last scene of this movie is Kong signing to the little girl and saying home.
Yeah.
And then it cuts to credits, and I got a little tear in my eye.
That was very effective.
That's all I need, man. He had his journey.
So
it was beautiful.
That's the third subplot we haven't brought up yet. So the other plot is Monarch is observing Kong. They built a giant dome over Skull Island.
They Truman showed him.
Yeah, because they're very concerned that Godzilla will show up and fight him, which she was right. The scientist who's like in charge of like keeping Kong safe.
Rebecca Hall / Jane Goodall.
So she's like, if we move him anywhere, like Godzilla will find him and attack him. For whatever reason, Godzilla hasn't realized this island exists. And even though Godzilla is
Skull Island in Skull Island, it's like it's concealed by a storm or something, like a constant storm system.
Right. So, and she ended up being right. So like Godzilla is like on a quest to just take down this conglomerate apex. But when it just happens to be swimming around, it finds out that Godzilla or King Kong's around and decides to like change course and go fight King Kong. So she was right.
Well, yeah. I mean that's simplifying a little bit.
It is
because
simplifying.
They take King Kong out to fight Godzilla because Godzilla seems to have gone rogue.
No, that's not what they were doing. They were trying to avoid Godzilla. That was
I'm sorry. You're right. They were taking King Kong to show them Hollow Earth because they needed to get a power supply from Hollow Earth to run what ends up being Mechagodzilla. But I think we didn't know that at the time.
None of those characters knew. So you had one of the Skarsgårds and Rebecca Hall.
But they knew that Godzilla was going to be attracted to King Kong, so they were trying to sneak through the backyards of the ocean.
Yeah.
So that Godzilla wouldn't realize, and then he did. So
yeah, totally did. And then
they knew that it was going to happen. They just hoped that it wouldn't.
So that third plot hole or that third thread is the Apex CEO goes to Alexander Skarsgård, who this is like one of the other issues I had with this movie. He's a geologist. And he and his brother came up with the Hollow Earth theory. And the CEO goes, oh, by the way, here's like the latest, like this is almost verbatim the line in the movie. Like, here's the latest imagery. You were right. And it just shows like a big black like circle in the middle of the earth with a few like tunnels coming out of it. And he goes, this is the latest imagery. Can you go? And then the guy's like, oh, so I was right. And he's like, yep, you were right. And he goes, oh, okay, so my brother did die going to the Hollow Earth. And then, like, all of a sudden, it's like, he went from, like, I mean, like, I'm kind of a quack and nobody believes me to, like, oh, I was totally right, and that's how my brother died. And then he's all of a sudden an expert on it. He's like, oh, yeah, there's, like, inverse gravity when you go, because it's in the middle of the Earth. So when you get to a certain point, gravity inverses. And
I mean, listen, I know you're kind of shitting on it, but I thought it was like wonderful B-movie nonsense.
Well, I immediately thought like, oh, this is going to be kind of cool. And I think this was part of it, because there is like part of the 11 and Hunt for the Wildebeest / podcast adventure is they show up in Florida. They go to like the Florida branch of the conglomerate, and they're like, you know, sneaking around the facility, and then they end up in like a little elevator. And then it goes through the earth to Hong Kong. So I was like, oh, cool. They're using the Hollow Earth as like almost like they did in the remake of Total Recall, where it's like, oh, we're just literally cutting through the middle of the earth to get to the other side of the world kind of thing. And I thought that was going to be kind of interesting. But no, it turns out like there's like a dimensional force field that they cut through. And then when they cut through there, gravity shifts and like it's like going through a black hole kind of thing. Like they didn't really explain it. But all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, I'm an expert on this now. And then he can pilot the ship with no training. Like he's just able to fly this like super advanced spaceship thing. Like it's not a problem. And then later on,
to be fair, he's just screaming the entire time.
Yeah, but later on he rewires the engine to be a defibrillator for King Kong.
Yeah.
And he's a geologist.
I love it, man.
So it's a little goofy, but like,
no, it's nonsense.
Yeah. And like this movie is way more fun than any of the previous movies in this. Like by far, this is like, we're not taking ourselves serious. Like we know you don't give a shit about the story. Like a lot of people don't give a shit about story if the visuals are amazing, which is very obvious by the Snyder Cut. But that's really what this one was. They're like, we don't give a shit about the story. We don't give a shit if you take this serious. Like you just want to see King Kong and Godzilla fight. So we're just going to give you a weird fucking story. And like for people who like that,
but you're right. But I still think that they went out of their way to provide an emotional connection to Kong.
I think you're right. I think that's totally valid. And
so you can hand wave the plot stuff all you want, and people will still enjoy the movie if it looks great. but people will remember the movie if they actually connect to one of the characters.
Yeah.
And I think they pulled that off with Kong. It's definitely a tightrope, though.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting. So, like, there's a girl who's deaf, and she signs to Kong, and it turns out like Kong is way more intelligent than anybody even realized.
Dude, so that moment was one of my favorite parts of the movie, where they realized that Kong can sign back to them, which in hindsight, I guess it makes sense that you'd have a gorilla be able to sign, because it's like a real world thing.
Yeah.
But when that happened, they didn't spoil it in the trailers, and I thought that was so fucking cool. And he started signing back, and they did the subtitle, and I was like, oh fuck, that's awesome, I love this.
And it really ties back to Kong Skull Island, because we find out, and it's funny, the director Adam Wingard mentioned this, and he goes, a lot of people were concerned about the size discrepancy, but luckily in the previous film they gave us the out by saying he was just a teenager and was still growing, so we were able to just make Godzilla or King Kong bigger and just hand wave that away. But in that movie, they reference, like, you see the skeletons of Kong's parents. And so he, like, clearly wants a family. Like, that's how they manipulate Kong into doing everything they want him to do. They're like, hey, if you go to this Hollow Earth thing, there's a potential that you have your family there. And so they eventually get to the Hollow Earth, and they find, like, giant...
They manipulate him, but luckily they are actually right.
Yeah, they find, like, giant Kong statues, and he finds, like, an ancient axe made with a Godzilla, scale or thorn or whatever it is, like on the back of his tails and his back. And they have, what was interesting is there were like buildings, like doors and like switches, like you can use the axe as a key, and there's a throne. And like, to me, I thought that was really interesting, but I'm also like, well, why didn't they do any of that on Skull Island? Like, why doesn't he have like a cool like cave where he didn't build himself a chair kind of thing? Like, I understand
they don't want to, let the humans know that they they can do all that stuff. That didn't really bother me. And I think like one of my big questions coming out of this movie is, what are they going to do with this series going forward? And I think that's what they can explore.
Yeah.
I think they gave themselves an opportunity for sequels there.
Yeah, I think so.
That didn't really bother me.
I am interested to see where this goes. Like, it's fun. Like, I've bitched about pretty much all these movies except for Kong Skull Island. Yet I still watch these. Like, I went and watched King of Monsters and didn't do a podcast episode on it. Like, I'm still watching these movies.
Out of all the like mega franchises that are going right now, I mean, this isn't my favorite. I don't think it's the best or anything, but I appreciate that this exists, because it's not like anything else. It's not like even Marvel, the fatigue is starting to set in. I think they're doing a great job entering their fourth phase, but it's there's some fatigue there, and DC is just trying to parrot them. And then also trying to like course correct all of their mistakes with doing that, or do the opposite haphazardly. And there's what other franchises are out there right now? Fast and Furious and James Bond,
Suicide Squad,
all those things.
But, I mean, you brought up DC.
Yeah, and I mean all these things just feel sort of tired, and I appreciate that there's this like ridiculous kaiju series that's just doing their own fucking thing.
Yeah,
I think it's cool.
I do think that they recognize,
and also I really appreciate that they're hiring filmmakers like Adam Wingard and Jordan Voight Roberts and Gareth Edwards. Say what you will, I think he's great. I want to see more movies from him. So I think they're doing what DC sort of promised to do, which is really giving interesting filmmakers a voice with hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. And I do think with each movie, the special effects got a little worse.
I don't know, man. I think this movie looks pretty good.
I thought Mechagodzilla looked terrible. I think Kong looked good.
How do you make Mechagodzilla look good? It's a ridiculous design.
Yeah, but you look at like Pacific Rim, like those robots still look cool. Like it
I think they wanted to make it look like the original Mechagodzilla.
I get that, but like it looked like a video game rendering to me. Like it looks like a video game cutscene Mechagodzilla did. Where I think it's still obviously CG. I think Godzilla looked incredible. Like I still think the Godzilla model looks fantastic. Kong, because he's he's an ape and he has more expressive face, he looks more CG than Godzilla does. But that's just, that's the uncanny valley thing. You recognize when something's expressive or has a face, looks animated. But I do think that, I think Godzilla 2014 had the best special effects of the four movies. And then I think Kong Skull Island was fantastic. Had amazing special effects as well. I think
Godzilla 2014 is very dark.
It is dark.
I watched it like 4 days ago, and it's incredibly dark. And I think it works for that movie, but you can't see anything. And this one is like they have a fight in Hong Kong where every building is lined with neon.
That fight was rad. That was a really cool fight, like Kong parkouring off things and stuff. Like
I was standing up on top of my couch clapping on every fight scene.
I didn't like the submarine, or not the submarine, the ship battle as much. I did appreciate, like, they promised that there would be a definitive winner. And I think they had their cake and they ate it too. So, like, round one, they even, like, called it out, like, Godzilla won round one, which was totally, like, made sense. Like, Godzilla can fight in the water where, like, Kong was out of his element and was kind of, like, surprised. And then they're like, oh, round two went to Kong because he, like, knocks Godzilla out. But then Godzilla comes back and, like, essentially kills King Kong, and they resuscitate him, and then they kind of come to an agreement after they fight Mechagodzilla together.
I was so worried that they were gonna like wink at each other or something.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. It's like, I guess you can say the definitive winner would have been Godzilla because he's the one who technically like almost killed King Kong. So I appreciate that they didn't just flat out call it a draw. And
Kong would have only won. Kong would have not survived without human intervention.
And I kind of like that. I don't know if this was on purpose. I'm going to give them the benefit.
And
of the doubt.
they used electricity to resuscitate.
That's what I was going to say. There's a couple different like
nod to the last movie.
Homages to that. So one, the electricity to revive King Kong. The other thing is the point where they like they fly him over somewhere else. So they flew, like in their previous movie, they used the wires and the balloons. In this version, they used helicopters and had him in a net and then dropped him. So, there are a few illusions.
They also, in the 63 version, he shoved a tree down Godzilla's mouth, and this one he shoves that bone axe down his mouth.
I thought that was probably the most effective thing. What I thought was funny was like, in the 2014 Godzilla, we got the atomic breath, once or twice?
Yeah, it was like, they led up to it.
They led up to it.
This one, he's just using it all over the place.
And then they used it a few more times in that one, in King of Monsters. But this one, he's constantly using it. And, the first couple of times he uses it, Kong's like, oh, shit, what the fuck is this? And then by the Hong Kong fight, he's, like, doing everything he can to grab his mouth and keep it shut, or hit him in the mouth, or drag his head around, or clump his mouth shut, or put the axe in his mouth. So like I thought that was really effective. Like I do think the fights were very, very well choreographed.
Yeah, agreed.
I was Team Kong though the whole time. Like I had this discussion with a bunch of people over the years where I always said like, an ape, relative intelligence, if they are like other species, an ape's going to be smarter and has the opposable thumb and the longer arms. And if he gets on Godzilla's back, there's not much, Godzilla should be able to do to get him off. So like, I was really hoping that, King Kong would be the definitive winner. But, I get it. Godzilla was top billed and has had 2 other movies. I kind of figured they would make Godzilla the winner though.
So where do you think they go after this? I think that I'm going to answer your question for you. I think that they've called Godzilla King of the Monsters, so they've used the term king in these movies, and Kong, who is usually King Kong, has not been called King Kong these movies. So I think the next movie is probably going to be a solo Kong movie called King Kong that's about him, ascending to power in some way, probably in Hollow Earth.
I think you're right on that front because this movie didn't have a post-credit scene. But Adam Wingard mentioned that they filmed a post-credit scene, but then they ended up using it somewhere else. And I think if I were a gambling man, he didn't reveal what it was, but if I were a gambling man, I would say before Kong goes back up to, Hong Kong to fight Godzilla and Mechagodzilla, there's a point where they're like hanging out in the little temple and Kong is just kind of sitting on the throne. I feel like that was probably the post-credit scene originally.
Yeah, I think it's going to be about him bringing order to Hollow Earth.
The one other nitpick I have that I thought was dumb, but like it was obviously very much a plot contrivance to be able to get them back up to the surface, was that Godzilla used his atomic breath as a drill and drilled to the core of the Earth just to give them an exit there. I thought that was a little weak.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the weaker parts. Didn't bother me, but I hear you. That's another thing. There's just a hole that goes to the center of the Earth now. So like whatever the next movie is going to have to deal with humans knowing about Hollow Earth.
Yeah.
and I guess like they went there and they can report back to it, but there's literally a hole in the middle of the earth.
So
that goes to it.
When this trailer came out, and people guessed Mechagodzilla, years ago, but then like people saw like in the trailer that came out like a month or so ago or 2 months ago, there's a part where like Mechagodzilla like dives over a bunch of buildings, and you just see in the trailer, you just saw like a flash of red. So people are like, oh, that's probably Mechagodzilla. But you also saw I keep calling them spaceships, but the ships that they were flying in this movie.
Earth ships.
You saw them in the original trailer for like a frame. They're only in like a frame or two in the original trailer. So I thought they were going to go like crazy with this and bring in the aliens. Cause like in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, all the kaijus apparently came from like aliens, and aliens were like experimenting with Earth. So for a minute, I thought those were going to be spaceships, like literally alien spaceships. So I kind of thought that's where this was going to go.
Ghidorah is an alien in King of Monsters, so I think that's another avenue that they can definitely explore. Like, where did Ghidorah come from? Yeah,
and that was the other thing that I thought like they didn't really explain in this movie was so the way they were building Mechagodzilla was Ghidorah had 3 heads, and so they say that there was most likely, they theorized, they didn't actually say it, but some of the leads go, they stumble across the control room, which was a Ghidorah skull, and the control center was in Ghidorah's brain. And then so they were like, oh, there's probably another Ghidorah skull / brain inside Mechagodzilla, and whatever, right? So I thought, they lose control of Mechagodzilla. Like Mechagodzilla somehow just electrocutes the pilot, and they're like, oh, it's controlling itself. Was that the AI, or did Ghidorah take over?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it might be like base level instinct of Ghidorah. I don't think like it knew that it was Ghidorah, but I think it's
because it was able to control all of its weaponry and everything. And very effectively. So I thought maybe it was AI, possibly, because they mentioned at the beginning of the movie, like there's a little infomercial about the company. They're like, we do AI and robots and this and this and this. So like I wasn't clear if it was AI, it was just like programming of the robot, or if it was Ghidorah.
Yeah, I think, it's a hand-wavy answer because we need the thing to be fully operational because it looks cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean...
Did you get that the telepathic pilot of Mechagodzilla is the son of Ken Watanabe's character in the last 2 movies?
That's what a lot of people theorized. I didn't catch his name. Was he actually the son?
Yeah. No, I'm looking at the Wikipedia. It's his son.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like they didn't really touch on it, but
I'm surprised they wouldn't like blatantly say that in the movie.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I feel like that would have been a really good.
But
even if they didn't say it,
these movies
looked at like a photo. We talked about, I think.
Yeah, like I said, I think these movies are concerned less and less with the main characters. I think that's more like becoming an Easter egg.
Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, I mean, you obviously liked this movie a lot more than I did. I think it's definitely worth watching. It's definitely worth the watch. If you have HBO Max, watch it. If you feel safe going to a theater, go to a theater and watch it.
Yeah, I got my my second poke last week, and once my 2 weeks are up, I'm definitely going to go see it on the big screen again.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely better than the 60s version. So this is definitely a remake where I'm going to say, yeah, it should have been made because,
stamp of approval.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks for listening. Alex, please tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm on the tweeters at Pulisci, Pulisci. You can find me on Instagram at Dysalexic, Dysalexxic. And if you want to follow along with what I've been watching, you can follow me on Letterboxd at Pulisci as well.
And you guys could check out everything that's MDXpods related at MDXpods.com, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at MDXpods. If you want to support the show and get extra content, you can go to patreon.com/MDXpods and support the show there. And pretty soon, I'm finishing up the paperwork with Amazon, but we are going to be Amazon affiliates. I know a lot of people don't like Amazon, but I know a lot of people are begrudgingly using them. So maybe by the time this episode drops, I'll have the link. But if you have to use Amazon and you want them to have a little less money, you can shop with our affiliate link, and then we get a very, 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 very small percentage. But, you're giving a little bit less money to Jeff Bezos, so think about it. But thanks for listening, and bye.
Bye.